I've played a lot of Final Fantasy VIII in my time. It's my favourite game in the series for many reasons, which should be abundantly clear to anyone who's listened to more than a single episode of the EXP Required podcast. But no matter how much I love it, it's impossible to ignore how much discussion there's been about how quote-unquote bad the game is though. It's literally been going on for decades. Though even I can admit there's a few story segments that are a bit... yeah. But the main point of contention has always been about the core gameplay mechanics. The Junction System has caught most of the flack over the years, but frankly, I don't get why. So let's take a look at what it is and why it works, or why it doesn't. Put simply, the Junction System is a form of character development made up of two pillars: Guardian Forces, summoned entities with elemental powers, and magic, spells that party members can cast. Both can be junctioned, equipped, to any party member, with the GFs acting as somewhat of an engine that magic fuels. So let's use Squall as an example. If we junction him with Ifrit, he can use a set number of GF abilities, like using items, casting or drawing magic, or even raining down hellfire. But we're also given the option to junction magic to Squall's strength stat. Slot the right spell in, and the stat goes up. But start using that spell in battle, and the numbers will go down too. Here's where FF8 differs from all its siblings, as there's no such thing as MP or mana in its world. Magic is instead treated as a consumable, with a limit to how much you can stock. Any character can carry any spell up to 100 times, which caps how many times you can nuke a poor unsuspecting catcher pillar before having to get more. And here's where the magic system's drawback comes into play. Boosted stats are weakened by using junction spells in battle, meaning that in a lot of cases, you have to sacrifice medium-term character growth if your playstyle relies on casting specific spells. In summary, junction a GF to any character. Use GF abilities to unlock stat boosters. Junction magic for stat increases. With 3 GFs given to you right out of the gate, your party should be equally balanced even if you don't find the other 19 GFs in the world. So what spells are given to us for free? If you really thought you'd get something for nothing, I've got an Ultima spell to sell you. All magic in FF8 must be obtained manually, and there's 3 ways of doing so. Drawing from monsters. This is what the game advises you to do. More on this later. Unsuspecting creatures get the spells literally sucked out of them for you to either stock or cast. Noting that draw casting doesn't deplete your stores of magic. Different monsters carry different spells, and sometimes GFs, with a maximum of 9 of a certain spell that can be drawn in one go. Drawing from draw points. Found across the world, and consider the replacement for the humble treasure chest. Draw points might as well be single use for how slow most of them are to recharge. The best are hidden in plain sight on the world map, and protected by the worst beast known to man! I hope you remember to junction encounter none. Refining items. Learning certain GF abilities allows you to turn otherwise mostly useless items into spells and better items. This can be especially exciting early on, when you otherwise wouldn't have access to 3rd tier spells. It might seem like a lot of effort, especially if you're coming from a title where characters learn spells simply by leveling up. But once you've got a decent selection under your belts, you'll be spending less time in battle stocking up. It's also worth mentioning that a number of GF abilities can only be learned by 1 GF, and many spells can't be acquired until much later, so there's no grinding your way to victory early on. Oh, and grinding has drawbacks too. No RPG is a stranger to enemies getting stronger as you level up, but FF8 takes it a step further. Enemy levels are calculated by your party's levels, so although you might be hitting harder, they are too. You can of course mitigate enemy level by using certain GF abilities, but every battle you win grants EXP, and chances are you won't be running from every random encounter. This means that after a while, low-level monsters are effectively removed from the game. Gee, I hope they only scale with us and not for the rest of the world, or Balam's gonna have some serious bug trouble. Most enemies drop items after battle, plenty of which can be traded in for magic, but as you have to beat them to get these drops, you'll be leveling as well, more or less cancelling out any gains you'd otherwise get. So what's the alternative here? Sit for hours drawing endlessly and then running from battle to keep levels low? Plenty of people do this, and we'll get to that later, but... I won't lie, the system does have its downsides. Most notably, if you're doing something wrong early on, you won't know until much later. A low-level party won't have much trouble blasting through the first disc, maybe even the second, and maybe even the third. On my very first playthrough, I got all the way to the Ragnarok before I ever looked at stat junctions, and I know I'm not the only one. But if you're into full customization, you're gonna love it. Character stats across the board are more or less the same, and with enough menuing, you can build a party that does something different each time you play. Why not go full wizard with a high-level spell in the magic stat? Why not see how hard you can hit without ever using a spell in the first place? What about giving the whole party status effects and seeing how badly you can ruin someone's day? The possibilities are endless, and that's what I love about it so much. Give me the chance to solve a problem in a few different ways, so I don't get bored when it's time for yet another replay. And if you prefer something more regimented, is it really that much of a problem? There's nothing stopping you setting up a party that functions like a traditional FF group. Hell, it's not like the characters don't fit into classic roles. Maybe the issues people have with the Junction system is how it's delivered, not how it functions. With how bright and cheerful Balam Garden is, it's easy to forget it's actually a military training academy, full of children. FF8's introduction reinforces the school setting with uniforms, final exams, and even a clumsy transfer student. You can even revise at your desk from the moment you take control of Squall. Definitely one of the more creative ways of blending gameplay and story together I've seen. Don't get me wrong, I love the overall concept. Take me to Balam, please. But this is where the cracks in FF8's presentation begin to show. Let me explain. The goal of any game is to solve a puzzle. Good game design presents the player with an objective, gives you clues to solve it, and then either rewards you for succeeding or knocks you down for failing. Easy enough, right? But how do you know if you're doing it right without feedback? Good skill checks, the final exam of games if you will be so well implemented you won't realise you're being tested in the first place. Take the very first level in Super Mario Bros. Move right, there's a mushroom. If you touch it, you die. You won't do that again. Try jumping on it instead. Boom! You've learned how the game works. And it doesn't matter what the game is. Whether you're struggling with Souls-likes or rewriting the rules to win, they all have one thing in common. Use the tools you're given to get to the next stage. Final Fantasy's no stranger to the concept either. Look no further than FF7's battle system, where character stats align more closely with traditional job roles. Tifa's weapons come with a crit bonus, making her a perfect attacker. Barrett's long reach and high HP make him a great back row tank, and Red 13 has 4 legs, so naturally he's quicker than anyone else. These little hints, on top of another highly customizable magic setup, mean that if you're paying attention, you'll have a powerhouse party pretty early on, and almost certainly by the time the game tells you outright to check the menu before the party leaves Shinra Tower. Use the tools you're given to get to the next stage indeed. Back in the world of FF8, tutorials are less do-it-yourself and more told-you-so. Early lessons are given by your in-game tutor Quistis, and then you're given free range to try them out. If you've been paying attention to Instructor Trape, you'll know that junctioning sleep spells to your status attack will give you the chance to send foes to La La Land. Of course, this tutorial undermines itself a little by suggesting you bring this new ability against T-Rexor. only for Quistis to then suggest you run when you encounter one. So although you certainly can use this new tool to get to the next stage, we're instead taught we don't have to use the tools given to us. And the result is less patient players barreling through a game that doesn't punish them immediately for their playstyle, or for ignoring early hints. Mind you, those early hints only really tell you to junction magic after drawing it from enemies. The effect this had on gamers at the time was telling.
Final Fantasy VIII requires you to draw magic from your enemies to use now or later. Yep, that's the only way you gain new spells. Everyone on the crew was in agreement that the game could have used a little balance when it came to drawing magic. Since FF8 encourages you to upgrade by drawing spells, a lot of time is spent just sitting there in combat, sucking magic from your foes. The only place outside of combat you can gain spells are draw points.
Remember the 3 ways you can get magic? Seems like not everyone got the memo. Even the US official PlayStation Magazine's full guide only makes vague references to abilities you can create spells with. And back in my day, guides like this were where you picked up tips and tricks that were otherwise hidden or unclear. And if even official guides didn't know about them. Not that I can really blame reviewers. The few tutorials given early on are text heavy and take you out of the game proper, and none of them tell you converting items is possible. Even I didn't read the status junction tutorial at the time, because there was no consequence to skipping the ones that came before. I could play the game just fine. Why bother listening? So I'm not going to pretend the junction system and its in-game explanations are perfect. Far from it. But I don't think it's a bad system either. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's up there with the other greats. Maybe it was because I was a child that the vitriol towards it went over my head. I had all the time in the world to figure out what worked and what didn't, and no consequences for spending the time to figure it out. I'm of course a lot older now, and definitely don't have the time I used to. And it wasn't just kids like me playing in 1999. Those reviewers definitely had other obligations. But why is there as much hate for it as there is? The rest of the game clearly wasn't looked at as disparagingly. Most publications were giving out 9s and 10s in their reviews, and rightfully so. Honestly, I think it's in no small part because of how poorly the game explains magic. But that's an easy fix. Giving Quistis an extra line of dialogue to explain item refinements wouldn't go amiss. And T-Rexos should be made a mandatory encounter early on. You could even do a seed test before going to Dollet. Maybe multiple choice would make it easy. And it's not like this is a particularly complicated system either. In the decades since FF8's release, there's been plenty of games with even more complicated skill sets to learn that are both critically acclaimed and well loved. If you can learn the difference between cantrips, invocations, and rituals, you can learn how to junction magic. Now, if only there was an explanation as to why our sorceress allies can't cast magic without a GF.